Hello, hola, bonjour, ciao, konnichiwa, namaste. Welcome to the first ever episode of Not Another Formula One podcast. Let's be honest, who wants to listen to another Formula One podcast? I sure don't. But this is not another Formula One podcast. I'm not an expert in nothing. I've never even recorded a podcast before. But I'm in love with this ridiculous sport. And fair warning, I am a Red Bull fan. I am a Verstappen fan. I even got a Red Bull tattoo after the Abu Dhabi 2021 Grand Prix. But I promise not to be too biased. Wink. I just wanna ramble rather aimlessly about the races and maybe put in my 2 cents. All in all, I just want to build a community of like-minded piss-takers, such as myself. So sit back and listen to this inaugural episode for what was, quite frankly, the best season opener I think we've ever witnessed. The 2025 Australian Grand Prix. Enjoy. We start off the race with a formation lap, and it's raining, of course, as the weather predicted. But Lance Stroll is the only person on wet tires. So foolish, I thought. I figured, what's the reasoning behind this? Why would you put on wet tires if it's only, I'd say, about a medium rain, and everyone else is on intermediates? I thought for sure he would just fall to the back of the grid and we'd forget about it and he'd probably crash. But somehow, we'd find out later I'd be wrong. I was wrong. But we'll discuss more about that later. And in this rain, of course, we get the first rookie to be eliminated in this baptism of fire that was a race. Isaac Hadjar spins after turn 1, which, can't blame the guy. It was definitely not the best conditions. Those white lines were atrocious. Even more atrocious was the almost 2 minutes we got of screen time of Isaac crying, just bawling his eyes out. I couldn't help but think, can we please get him off the TV? I get it, we're all disappointed. He's certainly disappointed. But why do we need to put him on TV for almost 2 minutes? That's longer than the average lap. Quite shameful of the TV crews, if I'm being for real. But had it not been for this TV recording, we wouldn't have seen Anthony Hamilton come up to console him, which was very wholesome. Round of applause for Anthony. Not so wholesome, though. Helmut Marko going to the media and saying that it was embarrassing. Look, we all know it's embarrassing. We just don't say it. So we start again, 15 minutes after the hour. And everyone gets a pretty good start, quite surprisingly. Oscar, Max, and Lando, all scrambling for first place. Lando takes the lead out of turn 1, with Oscar following. But Max makes the sweetest move around turn 2, on the outside, very similar to the wet performances he did in Brazil. And just as we thought the safety cars were maybe going to be away for a while, Jack Doohan's in the wall. Not surprised. Another rookie. Bins it. But so soon. So we get another safety car. And lots of coverage on his father, which I get it. The TV crews, they like to go to the garage and look at all the stunned faces. More to that to come. And I say that because underneath the safety car for Jack's crash, Carlos Sainz puts it in the wall right before the start-finish straight. And we get another glorious view of a Williams mechanic, head in hands. And I don't know, something about the Gen Z brain rot. Every time I see a Williams mechanic, I just can't help but think of the Future song, the "Let Me Know." So we're racing again, and there are no overtakes happening. And now all of a sudden, Yuki, Fernando, Albon, and Hamilton are under investigation. All eventually dropped, which I don't entirely understand. Charles Leclerc starts beefing with his engineer a little bit. Probably one of the funniest radio messages of the year with the water. I mean, as hilarious as the engineer's line was, I mean, where else did Charles think that the water was coming from? I mean, it's raining. The rain never stopped. And what also doesn't stop is Kimi Antonelli. This kid seemed to be the only person making any kind of moves today. What impressed me most was his first overtake on Nico Hülkenberg. Spins, and then overtakes Hülkenberg again at the same exact turn. And it's only lap 15. Max goes and takes a little dip into the water in sector 3, putting Oscar back into second. Quite shocking mistake from Max. Usually he doesn't make that kind of mistake, but it's quite easy to lock up the front left. I don't know what a K1 button is, but obviously Lewis wasn't pressing it. Not even for practice. But this isn't practice. This is a Grand Prix. We come to lap 34. The McLaren fellas are miles ahead of Verstappen. Must be something to do with how great they are on their tires. Or Max just really put the hurt in on his, trying to even keep up with them. But Fernando Alonso, thankfully or unthankfully, sacrifices himself about the same spot where Jack Doohan eliminated himself. Everybody pits, and Max goes on the mediums. Everyone else seems to go on the hards. And with about 20 laps left, you can see where the mediums were probably the better choice. But it's around this time under the safety car that we get news that there's going to be even more rain. And this safety car's out for a long time. I mean, Fernando crashed on lap 34. I don't think the safety car actually ended until, 42 or 43? I believe it was lap 42. The race resumes, and within a lap or two, both the McLaren boys take a dip into the lawn. I think maybe Oscar was too tight trying to follow Lando through the turn and took a little more of that curb. I know at this track, that's such a high-speed corner. Usually, you take a lot of that curb And that was the problem for both of them. Lando mysteriously, or magically even, got everything under control, but unfortunately for Oscar, just pirouetted perfectly across right in front of Max into the grass. And resoundingly managed to get himself out by putting it in reverse. And that might have had something to do with all that practicing reversing trailers up at Jeremy Clarkson's. A good old Aussie try, you could call it. With Foster sinking down to last and Norris pitting immediately after the little incident, Max is in the lead of this Grand Prix for the first time. But this rain is coming. It's coming down hard. And, hindsight's 20/20, but had he maybe come in a lap sooner, he probably would have had the advantage upon pitting again for inters. But to be honest, I think the McLaren was naturally on pace to lead that race throughout anyways. In this same corner where the McLaren boys had their incident, Bortoletto and Liam Lawson managed to find themselves in the grass. Now, this is unsurprising. Liam Lawson has 11 races under his belt. Bortoletto has none. But I expect so much more from Liam. And I think one day he could be the next best Red Bull driver. I hope. Maybe, and this is just a theory, Sergio Perez had a really good start of the season for 2 years in a row. And then after Miami, went downhill. What if Liam Lawson is the exact opposite of that? He gets some time to really figure out how this car works out. First quarter of the season, go ahead and write it off. But he could turn things around and maybe put in a strong, very strong second half of the season. So now everyone's pitting for inters, except for the Ferrari boys and Yuki. And on his Ferrari debut, Lewis leads the Grand Prix. Not for long, though, because everyone realizes that these are not safe conditions for slick tires. And they fall very quickly to the back of the pack. Or maybe not necessarily the back of the pack, but far enough that when Lewis asked where he was, responded with, "Oh, I'm in ninth?" So the safety car ends. It's lap 52 or something. Max isn't passing Lando. But the Ferrari boys put in a hell of a move on Pierre Gasly. And speaking of hell of a great moves, Oscar Piastri puts in his own on Lewis Hamilton at the same corner where he'd previously spun into the grass. Definitely the best overtake of the weekend. And finally, after 2 hours, this race is over, with the top 10 as following: Lando Norris, followed by Max Verstappen, George Russell, Kimi Antonelli, Alex Albon, Lance Stroll, Nico Hülkenberg, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, and Lewis Hamilton. My winner of the day, or winners, is definitely Mercedes. One for George Russell for picking up the pieces of Oscar Piastri, and as he usually does, and coming home third. And for Kimi Antonelli for having an outstanding rookie debut I mean, I think back to the free practice in Italy and him pushing too hard in the dry and thinking, well, he might just be too young and wants to go too fast. But I think this race in the wet showed a lot of maturity in racecraft. So shout out to Mercedes. On the other hand of the spectrum, though, is Haas, who, despite having 5 or 6 other drivers out of the race, still managed to have both of their drivers finish dead last. Very unimpressive, and not what I was expecting. I thought for sure maybe at least Ocon could bag a 10th place, but I knew they were doomed since qualifying. I want to give a big shout out to Lance Stroll for making me feel like an idiot. Definitely didn't think he'd manage to pull off a 6th place finish. Rather impressive considering Fernando, of all people, put it in a wall. Hopefully he'll keep up this consistency. Actually, then again, I hope he doesn't. I really hope he doesn't. What I do hope continues is the performance of Nico Hülkenberg. Now granted, 6 people were eliminated from this race, but for him to finish 7th is outstanding for this team. I'd say they definitely met their quota of points for the season, and they will not be developing on this car anymore. There's no way they aren't putting all eyes on 2026 after the bag they just got. So next week, the F1 circus goes to China. And I wouldn't at all be surprised if the McLaren boys rock up and steal the show again. But what I'm most interested is in if Oscar can keep up with Lando. I think that'll be the biggest question of the whole season, and something we'll look back on at the end of the year is, will this finish? Like over a 20-point gap between them now. Will it make a difference at the end? Will Lando keep the lead and hold on to it? Will Oscar recover? We'll have to wait and see. But that's all I've got for now. Thank you so much for listening to this show. I hope someday to increase the quality and quantity of my content. And with the support of you all, I may be able to do so. Until next time, peace out.